So, Stephen, um, we know, for example, that retaining muscle mass is extremely important for aging and for increasing health span, for protecting against falls and that kind of thing. Who do you see this device being targeted at? Is it targeted at a specific population, or is it more for athletes, or like what can people get out of this? Like, what's really the why behind this product?
I think one of the intentions that Coop had when he designed the UI, when he designed the device itself, was that he wanted to be able to provide like legacy for time-honored principles of training, like how many sets we do, how many reps we do, why is it important for this population, but also to retain like the capacity to embrace like a new set of features using this electromagnetic system to say, I think the best population for this is the population that says, I know what I want to get out of my time spent working out. Like they know the metric that they want.
Mm-hmm.
And Coop has designed this machine that provides basically just unbiased objective data to help you progress towards that metric that you choose.
I remember I was looking for a device maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. I was looking for a device that had the arms coming out of it with the cables, because I love that freedom that gives you, where you can adjust the arms up and down and back and forth and all the different axes. And it was very difficult to find that. So I that's one of the first things that I really noticed about this. Just that alone, apart from the software and the variable resistance, is pretty awesome. And so when I found that it had variable resistance as well, that's another plus.
Does the term like functional trainer ring a bell for you? Like
Yeah,
as
for
a machine,
sure.
like this is a machine, it's a functional trainer. It has two arms that go like this and potentially like this, and who knows, maybe like this, but two cables for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Somehow in a way that like the Exo trainer is like somewhat familiar when you see the two arms with the cables.
Exactly.
It almost like
anybody who's used a functional trainer before can kind of just jump in.
Beyond that first conversation with Brandon, I have to see it. I had to see it. So I rode a motorcycle from Boston to San Diego and I saw it and I said, it's familiar, but I know there's something more here just by looking at this blank screen. Like my imagination started running.
I'm just going to add a little bit on that. Steven rode the motorcycle, I don't know, it was like 6, 7, 8 hours on it. He didn't even tell us he's coming. He wanted to surprise us to see if we for real. And he kind of arrived somewhat unannounced in town. It was a great surprise in the positive sense. But this was an amazing journey he did. And then we had like, I think you've been here 2 weeks. It was a tremendous time of, going through ideas, and it's helped so much with brainstorming. The product was in a much more early stage than what you see today.
Through the years of observing folks in the gym, my own training clients of the past, there's barbell movements and then people are attaching rubber bands to them, or people are just using the tension bands, which provide these changing resistance profiles, if you will. But there weren't any numbers. And Coop started explaining it to me like, we can have it be as dialed in as when you pick up the 5-pound weight, it's always going to weigh 5 pounds. And when you want to do this resistance changing thing, we can dial it in at, I think it's 100 samples per second. It's very accurate, very precise.
Now, maybe it would help a little bit to jump back to like the anatomy and biomechanics, just basic stuff, right? So like, let's say, for example, you're standing up, right? And you're doing a dumbbell curl, right? Okay. So you got your arms straight down, right?
Okay.
At that moment, when you initiate that bicep curl with a free weight, that very first part, you're not really getting much resistance aside from the inertia of the weight, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Coop. I'm not a physicist, but that's at least been my experience. But when you get up here, right?
Yeah.
That's when you're starting to get more of that resistance, because now you're orthogonal to gravity, right?
Exactly. So this is high school physics. Which you just have to apply, multiply by sine of the angle. Steven knows it very well too. Exactly. So I'm not
like if the dumbbell were in my hand, we always imagined that it would have like an arrow pointing straight at the ground.
Yep.
And when the arrow is parallel to my arm, I get no torque. Right. And when it's 90 degrees to my arm, I get maximum torque. And when it becomes more of an acute angle there, I get less torque. But still more than when it was completely parallel.
Are there other examples like maybe that people can think about just to relate more intuitively to what that feels like? Like I'm thinking like a lateral shoulder raise, right, where you have no resistance to the bottom, right, and then you're starting to engage and then go up, and then this is where the maximum resistance
Exactly.
is how
Like
occurring.
And for example, in
easier,
in
easiest.
in the
As far as your shoulders
Yeah.
are concerned.
I'll give you a great example. If you look at the gymnastics in the Olympic on rings, you know that the hardest position to hold is the cross. And it's much easier to hold yourself all the way down, all the way up. But holding yourself in the cross position is so much harder.
We wanted to be able to take a way to compile all of these biomechanics principles and physics-based formulas, and we wanted to take all the science and engineering and display it to the user in a way that was meaningful, not overwhelming, simple, and to be able to train a industry professional like a coach or certified trainer or whatever, with how to provide them with a workout experience that's really going to be brand new to the whole industry.
Exactly. Yeah. So like kind of coming back to, because I don't think we ever closed the loop on the biomechanics. So the gap, right, is that when you're using free weights, and I love free weights, I think they're really one of the best ways to work out, but they do have a downside of being of having that issue. At some points during the range of motion, you essentially have no resistance, and so your machine here, you can set the resistance higher or lower at a certain point in that exercise, right? So that you're not dealing with zero resistance at that point, right? So in other words, in theory, you could have like a continuous resistance through the entire range of motion.
Yeah.
Or variable, whatever you would want to program in. Is that right?
We wanted to be able to say that maybe there are sometimes populations where a specific point within the range of motion is most valuable to them, and that point might not always be at the 90 degrees.
So,
but if we're stuck with a free weight, then we either have to reorient their body to make it such a way, like if we do an incline, like a curl on the incline, then that maximum point changes. But now the machine can change that, and it can change in real time, as you described. Like we can pinpoint that spot that needs
so
the right
just to add on what Steven was saying, the specific curve to compensate, for example, for a curl up is what we call a valley curve, where it's harder, then it's kind of becoming easier through when you hit your 90-degree angle compared to your body, it's kind of produced the least resisting the cable, and then it goes up. And that's kind of supposed to cancel this biomechanics effect. And you can, depending on how deep you want to make the valley, you can overcompensate or undercompensate. But that's the idea there, that it will give you this feeling that you overall feel the same resistance, but really the resistance the cable is changing in a way to compensate for your biomechanics.
I think we had been using prior research to do with like length tension curves.
Yes.
In the development of that, suggesting that like if we continue with the biceps curl example, the length tension curve is inclined, slightly more inclined, and then a slow decline, representing how much tension can be produced as the cross bridges increase. And it would be saying like very low tension here, but the valley curve would actually require high tension here, where you're physiologically weak, and then it would get easier. So like almost saying like the machine knows that you're strong there, it doesn't need to tax you there.
Interesting.
And maybe we need you to be stronger at the terminal range of the contraction.
Oh yeah.
So it's going to increase in tension again.
So
that's
guys,
really interesting.
I want to interject 1 second, because one of the things I think about every day as our clients use this, which is one of the reasons they love this so much, is if you take a 5-pound weight, let's say, and you're doing a lateral raise, 5 pounds per arm or 3 or whatever it is, with a dumbbell, 5 pounds always weighs 5 pounds. And that's what you said, that Stephen, when you were here back in June, and I never really thought about it. It's a constant and it never changes. But it's one of the beauties of the Exo Trainer is that we, like you guys have already said, we can change it. We might start with 1 pound at the bottom and 5 at the top, where the maximal engagement occurs. So or opposite. We can do whatever we want. We've got the mountain, the valley, incline, decline, flat, plus the fluidity setting is really cool. That's just barely scratching the surface. But keep going, guys. I love what you're talking about, because all this stuff is, I
So,
think, is what really makes this such a unique device, so highly versatile, really well put together, thought out, and versatile.
so
It's
let me
amazing.
just expand on that. The moment you go from a pure mechanical, which is what was available for many years, people started to lift trucks and then they lift weights and maybe they had springs or rubber bands, and that's what available for many years. And so all the training developed around what was available and maybe various positions to compensate for that. But with the advent of technology, we now have what we call the electromechanical, electromagnetic, and it's open a whole host of possibilities. And really, that's some of what, right, when we put it in the hands of people like Steven, is that it's just mind-blowing. Now you can define your resistance curve, and you need to kind of start thinking about what do we want to do with that technology. It's giving you so much flexibility, and that's where we started to develop those various curves, and also putting some good thinking behind it, and also through experimentation and trials, find out some of them people known for years what they're good for, and they try to do chaining and this and that in all kind of crude ways, or like breaking concentric from eccentric and so on. But some of them, like an inverse spring where it starts hard and becoming easy, may not been even available, or like the valley one that we just talked about. So it's open a host of possibility, and the idea is now, let's find out exactly and document, and that's some of what Steven is doing too.
I love it.
I think we wanted to create a model where it was time-honored principles, legacy for the use and the value of the free weight. For in the context that we've just been describing, however limiting it may be, it still has significant value and has proven significant value. But we want to know if we can quantify what these phases are going to be. With a variable resistance curve, we needed to create a new model for what's going to happen going forward. So we started with calling it the classical model, and that was the free weight. And the parameter that you had at your disposal was the time in phase, under the assumption that every repetition has an isometric long phase, a concentric phase, the isometric short phase, and an eccentric phase, cha-ching, one repetition. And then we go through the cycle again. And the thing that we had was the 5-pound weight and maybe 1 second here, half a second here, 1 second here, and then maybe 4 seconds here for the traditional intention of, I'm looking for muscular hypertrophy. I want to grow it, so I'm going to focus on that negative.
Mm-hmm.
We had this incredibly sophisticated way to create these resistance curves, so we wanted to start with the metrics. Like, if it was to be hypertrophy is why you're here, let's come up with a resistance curve that can be more well-intended for that than what a free weight could produce.
So it's interesting. So you actually have different programs depending upon the fitness goal, like hypertrophy versus strength. Is that kind of?
Yes, I feel like there are so many different types of strength. There's the endurance component of strength. There's the maximal force production component of strength. There's the eccentric component of strength. There's the postural stability components of it. There's the, how long can you hold the dumbbell over your head for a minute without starting to shake here. There are so many different ways to interpret the word strength. So we wanted to say, what is the user looking for, and how can we educate the trainer to provide them with the best exo trainer experience that's going to be tailor fit to that thing that they're looking to increase.
Yeah, one of the things that I keep thinking about is there's kind of a recognition that muscles strengthen at the range of motion where you apply resistance, right? So if it's mid-range, you're going to get more strength in mid-range. If it's more in an eccentric or at the end of the range of motion, you're going to get more strength there. And that's kind of another application.
How it adapts.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, I'll
And
go.
with the classical model, you get these 4 phases and you get time in phase. But if we were to break out the math, your equation has a fixed force variable. It's always 5 pounds.
And,
The weight is always 5 pounds.
and
But now we're saying going forward, we're going to create a library of resistance curves that we're going to call adaptive variable resistance, or AVR.
Mm-hmm.
These are going to comprise all the different curves, incline curves, decline curves. We have specific names for them, but I think what we've been working on a lot lately is how to translate what that curve can do for the metric that they chose. So if you're here for force production, like accelerating, like a sprinter or something, maybe, yeah, the idea of training with that tension band and your barbell is going to overload your concentric phase and make it harder for you to reach the terminal. Yeah, more explosive. But now we can do it specifically at the point of
and
least tension, most
I'll,
tension.
I'll,
We can
I'll reiterate on
accelerate
what
it.
Steven said, and I'll go back to gymnastics because I actually did that for a few years when I was younger. And you know that, for example, in gymnastics, in floor exercise, if you want to do 2 tumbles in the air, that's a lot of force production and explosiveness. But if you need to hold yourself in a position like the cross position, that's a completely different thing. That's more like isometric style strengths, where you and those are different disciplines of training, and that's very different. And you wanted to be able to address these 2 and many more with the exo trainer.